Hi, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is September 18th, and today we're going to hear part 2 of the article that we started yesterday entitled Cooling Hacks, Modern versus Ancient Wisdom. It was all about how to cool off when the weather is really hot.
And yesterday, we spent our time talking about the modern ways we cool off. Of course, we talked about air conditioning, but we also added a lot of personal ways that Karen and I tried to beat the heat in the days before we had air conditioning or days that maybe it didn't really qualify as an air conditioner kind of day. And today, we're actually going to look at actual ancient ways that people tried to beat the heat. And hint, they didn't always do a great job of it.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned, but we never, ever had air conditioning at home. So not everybody has air conditioning and has to make that choice. Okay, our first paragraph. Just as people today have smart tips for staying cool, ancient civilizations also had their own methods to beat the heat. Ancient Romans, for example, came up with numerous ingenious ways to cool off.
Clever city planning and architecture were used to deal with the high temperatures in ancient Rome. Fountains and parks were thoughtfully placed throughout the city to offer people relief. Furthermore, buildings were constructed with thick stone walls that did an excellent job of stabilizing internal temperatures. Narrow streets lined with tall walls also created plenty of shade for pedestrians.
The ancient Roman upper class had more options at their disposal when it came to summer temperatures. Their villas included large central courtyards that helped dissipate heat. Some villas even included underground chambers for storing snow and ice collected during the winter. This not only helped cool down buildings, but also provided ice for refreshing drinks all year long. When the summer temperatures became truly unbearable, ancient Romans retreated to the coast. Building seaside villas became the ultimate status symbol for Roman elites. These coastal homes were expertly designed to limit direct sunlight. With a careful orientation that followed the sun's path, they offered interiors that were cool and well lit, while also taking advantage of the gentle sea breezes and natural airflow.
Even after 2,000 years, people still employ some of the same methods ancient Romans used to survive the summer heat. Nothing beats enjoying a soft breeze near the coast with a cool drink in hand.
Back to the beginning. Our title again, Cooling Hacks, Modern versus Ancient Wisdom. Today we're going to focus on some ancient wisdom from ancient Rome. Our first paragraph again, just as people today have smart tips for staying cool, ancient civilizations also had their own methods to beat the heat. So we're mainly going to focus on Rome. We're not the only ones who thought of clever tricks to cool down when the weather was really hot. People have been doing this for a very long time. Ancient Romans, for example, came up with numerous ingenious ways to cool off.
So when we say something is ingenious, it just means really clever or really smart. In is usually like, it makes it negative. So it's like you're not a genius, but that's not what this is saying.
Yes.
This is ingenious.
Did you think that when you were a kid?
I want to say I heard ingenious in context as a cartoon because I never heard this, but some of my friends thought this, and we would argue about this, and I would make fun of them because I knew I was right.
Yeah, I knew that it was supposed to mean that, but in means not, so not genius. That is confusing, just like that is a priceless gem.
Yeah.
That was also confusing. If it has no price, then it's free, right?
Yeah, well, I could take it, right?
Right.
So the way we use this word is a little unusual. Yeah, this is, I want to say, we don't actually teach this in our curriculum. I feel like I need to sneak this in and see what students will say with this. I imagine, just as Karen is saying here, my students will predict that, this is in and genius. This is not a smart person. But actually, it means you're a very smart person.
If they could do that, then they have learned very well, actually, because that's what a native speaker would think.
Yeah, I think so. The ancient Romans, by the way, we have a lot of their written records, which is why Western writers will often reference what happened in ancient Rome. A lot of their records survive, and they're very easily translatable. There are many people that can access these records. So we know a lot of the ways the Romans did things, and they were really good record keepers. There were other ways that actually ended up in Rome from outside, but because their written records were less available or there were fewer ancient whatever language speakers, those records, we kind of just give it credit to Rome when actually it's from other places.
I have been thinking about this recently, that all over the world, if you do not have writing, you will eventually be conquered.
Yeah, that's usually one of the ways. There was usually one of those kind of higher cultural symbols because writing enabled organization, and organization increased your strength.
So you will find everywhere that it's the cultures that had writing that eventually dominated.
Yeah, I will say probably, well, the great historical exception with the Mongols.
I was thinking of the Mongols, but they did have writing.
But they got it later. They got it later after they beat up a bunch of people that could write.
Yeah, I was thinking of that one too.
The great historical exception always is the Mongol in some way. I swear to goodness. Think of some historical example, and the Mongols were like, no, we just beat up everybody until we could do it better.
And kill. Exactly. Okay, paragraph 2.
All right, next paragraph. Clever city planning and architecture were used to deal with the high temperatures in ancient Rome.
This is extremely important, and it applies to us today, so I'll mention more about it later. I learned about this and also applied some of these ideas when I remodeled my apartment 10 years ago.
Interesting. Oh, so you're going to tell us later.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited to hear this. Okay, So the Romans, of course, had a lot of poor people. They were in the city, and people knew that their popularity was tied to the way regular people felt about them. The true great leaders of Rome knew they needed the everyday support of people, not just the military or the other government officials, and making sure those everyday people were comfortable was an important consideration for a lot of the most famous Romans.
Actually, the ancient Chinese knew this too, because they said if the people are discontent, you're going to be overthrown.
Yeah. Fountains and parks were thoughtfully placed throughout the city to offer people relief.
Okay, so you've got a lot of cool air that will come through the trees and the greenery, and also fountains where kids and adults as well can go and play and cool off.
Rome was one of the few places in the world where fresh water was readily and easily available. There were many places in the world that struggled with fresh water. At least some of the time, Rome was not one of them at its peak. There was always water coming in somewhere.
And they also had flush toilets.
Yeah, they had flush. There's good stories out of that. We don't have time for them. But the point is that the flush toilets meant that you had water available to get it out of the city.
Right.
Let's go on. Furthermore, buildings were constructed with thick stone walls that did an excellent job of stabilizing internal temperatures.
This is the first point, and it's really important. If you have thick stone walls, they will absorb the heat. It will take a long time for that heat to make its way into your home, and that will keep it cooler inside most of the day. And then at night, when it gets cooler, it will release some of that heat and will keep you warm in the evening. So that is the idea behind a passive house. The important thing is you have to place them in the right place so they catch the sun at the right time.
When we stabilize something, that means we keep it nice and even so that things don't change too radically. It's not too high and it's not too low. Narrow streets lined with tall walls also created plenty of shade for pedestrians.
So we call it shade if it's from like a wall or a tree when you're walking. A shadow is something that follows you when you walk if there is any kind of light. So shade and shadow are used rather differently. So let's move to the shade. It's too hot here. So, you are following in my shadow.
Speaking of your shadows, we have pedestrians, and pedestrians create shadows because their shadows are following the people walking around. A pedestrian is a person that walks around. One of the ways that some middle-income Romans would beat the heat is to ride their horses around. They created a breeze. Now, they had enough money that they could afford this. Most everyday Roman peasants were stuck in the city. They didn't have a way to beat the heat. But kind of like rolling down the window to create a breeze, you could do that with your horses.
That brings back memories. And then I also think of dogs. Dogs love that. Riding in a car with the window rolled down. Okay, next paragraph. The ancient Roman upper class had more options at their disposal when it came to summer temperatures.
When something is at your disposal, this just means they had more options they could use when it came to like really hot seasons or really hot times of the year.
Or they had enough money to get something that other people didn't have enough money to get. Their villas included large central courtyards that helped dissipate heat. So if you have a big yard, you will often have plants in it that will help keep things cooler.
So this word dissipate is a verb that means to cause, to weaken, or lessen. So the heat is still there, but it isn't as bad because of these other things they do. The heat is dissipated. It is weaker.
Some villas even included underground chambers for storing snow and ice collected during the winter. And we would sometimes go to the basement if the weather was really hot, where it was much cooler, also damper, but much more comfortable.
So a chamber is a room, and the snow came from the Alps, and this was a very important system for Rome. Just like I said earlier that we had fresh water in Rome at almost all the time during the great Roman period, and not after the fall of Rome, but there was also ice readily available for many times. In fact, Romans were big fans of taking baths, but they didn't just take regular old baths. They had special baths that were cooled by snow even in the summer. And so you would go with your family, cover yourself in oil. They would use the word anoint. They really like this word, anoint yourself with oil. And then you'd rub it all over your body and you would scrape it off with not quite a blade, but it was a rather sharp instrument. And then you would jump into a warm bath and then jump straight into the frigidarium, which if you even understand a little bit of English, frigidarium has the word fridge, refrigerator. It was cold water, and it was kept cold with actual snow from the mountains. And these were kept underground. There were special buildings shaped like cones. There were all these ways that the Romans figured out and stole from the Sumerians to keep ice all year round. And the wealthier you were, the more you used this ice. In fact, the richest Romans could actually keep fresh shellfish at their party, which is famous for going bad and getting you sick. But the Romans, the richest Romans, could afford so much snow and ice. Even in summer, we can have fresh oysters or clams, which, man, I wouldn't eat those.
Yeah, even now there are sometimes problems with them. To continue, this not only helped cool down buildings, but also provided ice for refreshing drinks all year long. I'm just wondering, how clean is that ice that they're going to put in a drink directly?
There are dirtier things you could do in Rome.
I suppose. So they had this snow and ice stored up in a place where it could keep cool and wouldn't melt right away, and they could also use that for their drinks. When the summer temperatures became truly unbearable, ancient Romans retreated to the coast.
So when we have a refreshing drink, this just makes you feel better. When we retreat, this usually means we run away from a fight because we know we lost. This one, retreated to the coast, means we are running away from the heat because it's really just too hot. It's unbearable.
Okay, next sentence. Building seaside villas became the ultimate status symbol for Roman elites. And that just made me think that things have not changed because that's still what we do today.
That is true. That all along history, you'll hear about people escaping to their villas outside of the city during the times of unbearable heat.
Yeah, and it seems like people really just love beaches. They always want to go to the seaside. And I have never really understood that because I'm not really a good swimmer and it's hot there. You get sunburned. I have really fair skin. So it's not for everybody.
Some of it relates to the way we understood medicine. People in the past didn't understand germs. They didn't know why they got sick, but they knew that sick people smelled bad, and things that smelled bad could make you sick. And so they often associated dirty smells with getting sick. However, when you went to the ocean, there was a lot more open air. There were less areas for people to create pollution, and so the air there generally was better. After, who was it that got shot? One of our assassinated presidents in the United States, they actually moved him to the coast specifically because they thought, even though this is after germ theory, like we just got to get this guy near the ocean because the fresh air is going to help him.
It wasn't Kennedy. Oh, it was much earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Have to look that up. These coastal homes were expertly designed to limit direct sunlight. So I was just saying, when you go to the beach, it's really hot there and I get sunburned, and I have terrible after effects from a sunburn I got in the Philippines. So it's not something I would do. But they knew about that. So they would design their homes there so they wouldn't get direct sunlight that would give them sunburn.
Yeah, they would basically face the houses off the sun. So they would kind of face them in a northward fashion. All the important rooms would avoid the high sun. So there were no bedrooms directly under the midday sun. They were all faced off in a direction where it would be more comfortable overnight.
Actually facing south the way Chinese have traditionally done it is the best way to do it. With a careful orientation that followed the sun's path, they offered interiors that were cool and well lit, while also taking advantage of the gentle sea breezes and natural airflow. Like I said, I learned about that when I was remodeling my apartment over 10 years ago, and I couldn't change the orientation of our apartment. It's in a building, but I was able to place fans in different places and then use a lot of sun-blocking shades, which help a lot. If it's hot, pull down sun-blocking shades, and it will get cooler immediately.
So when we talk about orientation, this means the directions we are facing or the direction certain things are facing. This just means north, south, east, and west. This is your orientation. All right, before we move on to our final paragraph, now there were actually other ways that people cooled off in around the world before they could afford their seaside villas. Not everybody could afford seaside villas. So what did regular people do? Well, one of the oldest ways to cool off that started in Egypt and, in fact, later traveled to Rome through trade and people talking and stuff was just taking regular old mats of cloth or whatever it might be, and they would soak it in those fountains thoughtfully placed around Rome, and then they would hang them all over the house, but especially through the windows where breezes would blow in. And the water evaporation, when the water dried, it would take some of the heat with it. Now, this did have the nasty effect of kind of making your house a little smelly.
Humid.
It would also make the house a little bit dark, but it was one of the important ways of drying things out. Now, it's true that it did make it humid in Rome, but that wasn't as big a problem in Egypt where it's very dry.
Very dry.
Yeah, so this was one of the ways that regular people were able to kind of beat the heat or combat the heat in these hotter places of the world. In China, there was the really wealthy could lay on a bed of jade or other type of ceramic, and they also could bring down snow in certain places. They would put that inside of the jade or whatever item they were laying on to cool that, and then they would have mats on top of that as another way of cooling off. But that's more of the rich guy's way of cooling off. I was always more interested in what did the regular people do?
Some cultures have chalky body paint that they put on, and that also helps keep the sun's rays from directly shining on your skin.
I want to say that some cultures also learn that from elephants. That's what elephants do, right? They'll roll in the mud. And they use that to cool off. The sun is not beating down on them, so they're not getting sunburns. And that cool, muddy water also releases heat from their body, so they're able to stay a little bit cooler that way. So the animals have their own way of beating the heat, too.
Right. The cultures I was thinking of are Aboriginal Australia and Burma.
Right. Oh, there we go. So probably in areas that didn't have as much technology to do certain things.
And still don't in some cases.
All right, let's move on to our final paragraph here. It's very short. Even after 2,000 years, people still employ some of the same methods ancient Romans used to survive the summer heat.
So they were onto something. Things that they did back then, we find still work now.
Nothing beats enjoying a soft breeze near the coast with a cool drink in hand.
Yeah, for me, I will just hide inside where it's cool and out of the sun. But, to each his own. We have a few questions for you. Number 1, the following are descriptions of different body parts. Where is the most effective location to apply a cold cloth for body cooling?
A, tonsils, the soft tissues at the back of the throat that help fight infection. I'm pretty sure sticking a cool cloth into your tonsils is a good way to choke.
You can't see your tonsils anyway. You can't reach them. B, nostrils, the 2 openings in the nose through which air enters and exits. Now, when I think of that, I think of wintertime when you cover your nose so that you can warm up the air. Otherwise, the hair and the boogers and everything in your nose freezes. So that's more applicable to cold weather when you're trying to get warm.
Letter C, the radial artery. Located on the inside of the forearm, it lies just beneath the surface of the skin.
This must be our right answer because we want something that is close to the surface of the skin.
At letter D, just quickly, the mandibular joint. This joint, where the lower jawbone meets the skull, enables movement for talking and chewing. Mandibular.
That's a good word. Right, that's not the answer. So the correct answer is C, number 2.
How can a person's diet affect them during the summer?
A. Eating ice cream can cool the body's core temperature. Well, it may cool you off a bit, but the problem is it's full of fat, and that's going to heat you up as your body tries to digest that fat. It's kind of a lot of work.
Letter B. Eating dishes rich in protein can raise the body temperature. So the article specifically mentions eating lots of beef and pork has lots of fat, and that's difficult to digest, which makes more heat. And of course, this will affect your diet during the summer. Letter B is the correct answer.
That's right, because that really does happen. Stay away from really heavy food with a lot of fat and a lot of protein. Letter C, eating fruit can tax our body's cooling system. That is not true. That is one of the things you should eat, fruit and salads, when it's hot.
Letter D, eating raw vegetables can help digestion and warm the body. Now that part is incorrect, warm the body, or at least it's incorrect in that raw vegetables don't heat the body nearly as much as it takes to digest fats in beef, pork, and ice cream.
And other protein. Okay, so number 2, the correct answer is B. Number 3, in what way was ancient Rome designed to help people during the summer?
Okay, letter A, high walls were used to block warm winds. Now, there were high walls around Rome, but they were used primarily for blocking the sun so that it created shade. It wasn't about stopping the wind. They would want the wind.
That's right. So letter A is not correct. B, fountains were placed around the city for cooling. That is correct. That is our answer. And I'm already sort of jumping into a fountain. It sounds fun.
Let's go to number 4 here. What did wealthy Romans do to keep themselves cool?
A, stored snow in underground spaces.
That's right. That is the correct answer here. Letter B, they traveled to deserts.
Yeah.
There were deserts nearby Rome, but they weren't going there to stay cool.
And C, constructed villas in the middle of the city? No, you would probably go off in a more remote area with lots of nice trees and bushes and things.
Letter D, made use of the sun to provide power for cooling devices. No, that's a modern thing.
That's right. Okay, and that's it for today. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.